It's a well-known fact that the higher you score on the MCAT, the bigger the buffet of medical schools you get to choose from. But even if you land a 90th percentile score, your job is far from over. You still have to ride several waves of med school applications, interviews, and wait lists, culminating hopefully in multiple acceptance letters. Well, it's not an easy journey applying to medical school. And understanding this, Linda Abraham created Accepted to empower med students to better their chances of getting into their dream school. They do this by helping these students relate their unique stories through their graduate school applications, presenting in a compelling way their story, achievements, and aspirations, which can serve as their ticket to their desired schools. So if you're about to take on the MCAT or have already successfully slayed that beast and are now trying to get into medical school, Linda is here to reveal exactly what med schools look for in a top application. So pay attention. Okay, Linda, let's kick off with a bit of context. What does the medical school application process look like? So when should students start applying? What are they expected to submit? Give us the full scoop.
Okay. Well, there's kind of a narrow definition of the application process, and there's the broader definition of the application process. The broader definition actually starts a couple of years before applicants do the narrower definition, okay? And it starts with taking appropriate courses, getting good grades, demonstrating a commitment to service, exploring clinical life so that you know what you're getting into, and of course, doing well on the MCAT. The narrower definition of the application process starts with the primary application, when all that other stuff is either in process or completed, frequently completed, or sometimes in its later stages. So the narrower definition starts with the applicant who wants to attend a U.S. medical school, completing between 1 and 3 primary applications. The primary application, there are 3 primary application services. There's MCAS, which is the biggest one. There's ACOMAS, which is for DO programs. And there's the TMDSAS, which is for Texas medical and dental schools and also osteopathic schools. So it's like Texas is its own country a little bit there. And all the primary applications are somewhat analogous to the Common App that many applicants will be familiar with from when they applied to college. In other words, it's one application that they fill out online, and they choose which schools the application service will send it to. And once the application is verified, then the application service sends it exactly to the schools that they want to. Mm-hmm. Usually about, depending upon when and what, 2 to 4 weeks later, they will start to receive secondary applications. Secondary applications are individual to specific schools. So Duke will have a different secondary application from Kaiser, from UCLA, from NYU, from Penn, from all the others, okay? And they differ widely from school to school. Some schools will ask for a check and maybe a couple of short questions or a form. Other schools will ask for a check and several essays. They all ask for a check, unless somebody's in the fee assistance program. But that, some can be very demanding, 5 or 6 essays, individual essays. Yeah. So there's tremendous variety there. The final stage in the medical application process for most applicants is the interview, or at least that's what you want it to be, the next stage and hopefully the final one. Interviews are by invitation only, and they're after the primary and secondary applications have been screened. If you're invited to interview, your chances of acceptance have gone up dramatically. Usually acceptance rates for interviewed applicants are around a third. It can be a little higher, it can be a little lower, but that's pretty typical. Some applicants will have a 4th stage, that's called the wait list, but most do not. Okay, so wait list is not uncommon, but again, hopefully you manage to avoid it.
What a process. I mean, you're not only
a process, yes,
going through college and then studying for the MCAT, but at the same time, you're juggling this enormous task of trying to get into a med school. That's crazy.
It's a marathon. It is by far, Accepted works with multiple graduate application categories, and the med school application process is by far the most demanding.
Mm-hmm. Gee. Okay, so you've outlined roughly the difference between the primary and secondary application stages, but what is the best approach to each?
Okay, great question. The purpose of the primary is to show your fitness to become a physician. Mm-hmm. Do you have the intellectual horsepower? grades, MCAT score? Is your commitment to clinical medicine based on experience or the latest television show that you happen to watch? Does your application evidence a commitment to service? Because being a doctor, being a physician is fundamentally about service. Do you reveal teamwork skills, communication skills, compassion, empathy, as well as, again, the intellectual horsepower to succeed in medical school? That's what the primary is about. The secondary application is about your fit with a specific program. There's a difference there. It's not that the stuff in the primary is ignored. It's definitely considered also, but it's much more focused on your fit with a specific medical school whose application you're filling out. Yeah. So do you share that school's mission and values? Do you have goals and interests that will benefit from its strengths? Will you be a good match and fit for its community? Yeah. And underlying both types of applications is the question for the reader. Would the reader want you taking care of themselves if they were seriously ill, or a loved one?
Yeah.
That's just a fundamental question in the application process.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what do you find to be the bad habits or mistakes that students make in these applications?
How much time do you have?
Wow.
All right. Mistake number one is, I think, writing what you think the admissions committee wants to read, as opposed to what you want them to know about your experiences and motivations, and the experiences and motivations that convince you becoming a physician is right for you. And that's particularly for the primary. Right. For the secondary, it's more about, why would you want to attend this school? If you were accepted to all the medical schools that you applied to, why would you choose this specific program? How does it meet your needs? So that's what you should be thinking about and including in your application. Mistake number two, turning your essays, especially the personal statement that's part of the primary application, into a resume in prose. I was born here, I went there, first I did this, then I did that. And you're a writer, I'm sure you realize that's terribly boring. And most of this information is also found in the activity sections of the application. So your personal statement or your essay is not adding any value. It's not giving the reader any additional insight into you as a human being. That's a big mistake. The essays should provide a window into the real person that is you, add value to the other elements of the application, and demonstrate your writing ability. And if you just write a resume in prose, you're really not doing that. Mistake number three, I thought you need a lot of time here. Okay, divorcing the what you've done from the lessons you've learned and the significance of those activities to you or to others. If you write only in assertions that reveal your conclusions about an activity, but you don't really discuss what happened, all right? You just, I'm a great applicant, but how do you prove that? There's no evidence, right? That is not a good way to write. It leads to boring and not terribly credible essays. Writing only about examples and anecdotes and experiences without discussing their significance. It may be slightly more entertaining or readable than the first one that I just mentioned, but it still doesn't give the reader a clue about what makes you tick. And that's what's important. So you want to balance anecdote and analysis. You want to provide both the what and the so what. Mistake number four, and we can go on, but I think it'll probably be enough, is if in your activity descriptions, you focus only on what you did and you leave out what you accomplished, the results of what you did, the impact you had, you're missing an opportunity. Yeah. You're making a mistake.
It's amazing to me because as a writer, I understand how difficult it is to convey stories or data wrapped in stories so that people want to read. And I mean, considering these people are science students effectively, and I studied science. There's no teaching how to write compelling, stories in science. Usually it's very dry academic stuff. It's just crazy that these candidates have to become great writers to motivate their way into medical school. Yeah.
Well, they can get help. They can get guidance on the writing. It's obviously what my company does. But, a lot of times when we talk to other people, when we talk to our friends, if you go out to dinner or coffee with some friends, you're going to sit around and tell stories.
Right. Yeah.
That's true. And you probably will almost naturally talk about the significance of those stories. Mm-hmm. So it's not it's not an easy task, especially for those trained in the sciences, but it's not also not project impossible or mission impossible.
Yeah. Okay. So you touched on this in your first answer, but is there anything pre-med should be doing earlier on in their education to prepare for their med school applications, or at least set themselves apart from the competition as notable candidates?
I think there's a lot of things they can do, actually. And I think it's more to think about setting yourself up for success in the process and necessarily completely individuating from the other candidates. That's a little bit different part of the process. That almost has to do more with how you present what you've done as well as what you have done. But there's a lot of things you can do. One, get good grades. Yeah. It sounds basic, but you know what? It's really important. Mm-hmm. Volunteer in clinical settings. Don't expect to be successful in the medical school application process if you've never set foot, not as a patient, but as a service provider, or at least as a shadow of a physician, or if you haven't volunteered in clinical settings, be it clinics or hospitals, hospices, old age homes. The opportunities are really endless. Yes, I know about COVID. I know that the volunteer opportunities shut down during COVID, but things are opening up now. Mm-hmm. And I would strongly encourage anybody interested in becoming a physician to start looking for clinical exposure early on in the process. That's really critical. That is a hard requirement of a successful application. Also, make time for service. It can be community service, serving, in underserved neighborhoods, underserved communities. It can be, again, working with the elderly, the very young, immigrants, socially disadvantaged. The opportunities, unfortunately, are endless. The needs seem to be endless. I would also, along with this list, and this might surprise you, is encourage the pre-med applicant to take time for things that they enjoy and value, especially if those things are not directly related to medicine. Yeah. So I cannot tell you how many times I have interviewed. I mentioned that we have our own podcast, Admission Straight Talk. I've interviewed either medical school directors or medical students and residents. The medical school directors say, make time for those things. That's what's going to distinguish you. It's those interests that are going to distinguish you. The medical school students and residents, if I say, is there any advice you have for pre-meds? Make time for the things you love. Oh. Now, some of them will overlap with either your community service interests or perhaps clinical exposure, but I can't tell you how many times, how consistently that comes up in interview after interview, whether it's with medical school admissions committee directors or the people who have been successful in getting into medical school. Sometimes it's a form of a regret. Sometimes it's, I wish I'd done more of that as an undergrad. Yeah. But it comes out again and again and again. And the final thing I would say is take the MCAT really seriously. It's important. Make time for MCAT prep. I know that Stanford went MCAT optional and University of Wisconsin went MCAT optional, but most medical schools did not. You're almost for sure going to have to take an MCAT. Take it very seriously. It's like a part-time job or another class or two. Make the time for it. That will make the biggest difference. Devote time to it. Mm-hmm. So I realize I've given a lot of things, make time for this, make time for that. But again, it's a demanding process.
Exactly. And you're preparing for a career in medicine, which is incredibly demanding. So you might as well get used to the pace right now.
Right. And it might make sense to take a gap year. There's nothing wrong with that. And it might make your life a whole lot more sane.
And maybe you could you volunteer in that gap year? You could take do your clinic,
or you could work.
Okay. Right. Cool. All right. So how many med schools should students be applying to on average? I know you said between 1 and 3, but is there like a
No. There are one to 3 primary application services.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
My bad.
Right.
Yeah.
But you definitely apply to many more medical schools. At least that would be my recommendation. Yeah, so, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no. Please. Thanks for correcting me. So is a more is more approach better? So the more you do, the better?
Well, I think there is a law of diminishing returns at some point. I was talking to a medical school applicant recently, and if I recall, this individual planned to apply to 60 medical schools. And I said, no, you don't want to do that. You definitely don't want to do that. that question is another excellent question. And it's actually something that's really hotly debated. There's no generally accepted rule. I have people on my staff who say 20 to 25. I have people on my staff who say, I do more like 8 to 10. Mm-hmm. So certainly it's not 3. Nobody says 3 that I've heard of. But I'm kind of more like in the 20 range. Right. It might be fewer if there are fewer medical schools in your home state. It might be more if there are many medical schools in your home state, or if the competition in your home state is more intense. Mm-hmm. Also, if you're applying to more competitive schools that have lower acceptance rates, you might want to up that to 25. Wow. So, it's a very demanding process.
Yeah. And bearing in mind that you have to tailor each application to each individual school, that's a lot of work. So if you want a lot of work,
yes. Yes.
All right. So considering how important it is for a student to score well on the MCAT, do you have any advice for those who are currently studying for this exam, apart from giving themselves a lot of time and taking it really seriously?
All right. Well, I'm not a test prep expert, but I think the major thing is just invest the time. Do the study questions, a lot of repetition, focus on those areas that you find difficult. I know it's more fun to do the stuff that you find easy, but focus on those areas that you find difficult. Treat it like a part-time job or major class. Study as hard as you can for the test. Don't take it on a lark, but the day before, don't open a book.
Yeah.
Don't open a book. Get a good night's sleep, arrive at the testing center early, and think positive. Think that you're going to ace it.
You can always retake the MCAT, but good MCAT scores are really your golden ticket to a good med school. Yeah. Okay. So what criteria should students be looking for in the med schools they wish to apply for?
Okay. There are a few, I think, primary factors to keep in mind, and how you actually weigh them up really depends on your individual circumstances. Mm-hmm. One key element is just your competitiveness, your stats, the GPA, the grade point average, in comparison with those that have matriculated at the target schools. Again, if we take the kind of 20 schools, roughly 20 schools as recommended, I would recommend that the applicant apply to 3 to 5 safety schools. And those would be schools that they would attend, not schools that they wouldn't attend, but schools that they would attend where their stats are above average. Then maybe 10 to 13 where they are competitive. Their stats are right around or slightly above average. And maybe 2 to 4 stretches where they know their chances aren't that great, but maybe they're in state, maybe there's a particular program that they're just right for, or an approach that particularly appeals to them. The other thing I would strongly consider and suggest that applicants should consider is the whole in-state versus out-of-state element. Mm-hmm. In-state public universities and some private ones, especially in Texas, will prefer in-state residents. You'll see a distinctly higher acceptance rate for in-state residents. You'll also see frequently lower tuition for in-state residents. And that can save you tens of thousands of dollars in tuition and then future interest. So that's one thing that I think applicants should strongly consider. Then they should also look at the program itself. What are its strengths vis-a-vis their interests and goals? Now, yes, I know your goal may change in medical school. That's okay. You know you want to be a clinician, but you don't know if you want to be a cardiologist or an orthopedist or a dermatologist at this point. Okay. Yeah. But maybe you have some direction. Maybe you know you're going to go into a specialty or into primary care. Well, maybe the school is great in primary care. That would fit if you really want primary care, and it's not such a great fit if you don't want primary care. Does your target school send grads into the specialties that you are more inclined to? Are you interested in something like urban medicine or perhaps rural medicine? Some schools are very clearly, very proudly proclaim themselves as social justice schools. Is that an interest of yours? If not, if you want to be a plastic surgeon for the stars of Hollywood, then probably the social justice school is not for you. So those are things that you should be considering. Do you like to work in small teams? Some schools are very proud, like Kaiser, of their small teams and the importance of that. Do you want a case-based method, a systems-based method? Is significant early clinical exposure important to you and most schools at this point do offer that, but some offer more, some offer fewer, longitudinal clerkships, research opportunities. Again, that kind of goes back to the fit that we talked about in terms of the individual schools for the secondary application. Mm-hmm. The last thing I would say that you should consider, and this should be a consideration, is just personal reasons, personal preferences. Are you going to move across the country, and is your significant other going to be on the West Coast while you're on the East Coast? Is that something that you and your significant other are willing to put up with? What about proximity to family? Do you hate snow? Do you love snow? Do you hate warm weather? Do you love warm weather? I mean, those things count. Yeah. Do you want to be in a big city? Do you prefer a smaller college town? I'm not sure that, if you have multiple acceptances, then you can be very choosy about those matters. Mm-hmm. If you don't have multiple acceptances, I'm not sure that those matters should be primary for everybody, mm-hmm. but they are real and they should be something that you consider.
And I think they are important when you consider that, your healthy psychological state is so important for getting you through medical school, because if you're miserable because it's snowing all the time and because your significant other lives, 3,000 miles that way, it's going to play a role in your success. So I think if you have the fortune to choose, it's important to take into account. Right. Yeah. Okay. So finally, how does your brand, accepted.com, help pre-med and med students progress in their journey to becoming doctors?
All right. Well, we guide applicants through the med school application process. We also help residency applicants with their essays to residency, residency programs, so that they can save time, apply confidently, and improve their chances of acceptance. Our staff consists of highly experienced consultants, former post-bac program directors, and former medical school admissions committee members, and one is actually a former chair of the admissions committee at one of the country's medical schools. And they can help your viewers either on a flat fee for a certain basket of services basis or on an hourly fee basis. We can help them select activities and classes if they're early in the process, choose where to apply, and then present themselves effectively via the application, whether it's the primary or the secondary or ultimately residency applications. In a nutshell, we help them eliminate the errors that you and I discussed earlier and optimize their applications.
Yeah. Well, the process is hard enough, so it's really great knowing that there's somebody there who can really help you, hold your hand through that. And I think that's great. Yeah.
There are I once read that Winston Churchill almost never edited his writing, and he was a brilliant writer. But very few of us are Winston Churchills. There's a reader, there's a reason, I mean, you're a writer, there's a reason that writers have editors.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Well, Linda, thank you so much for talking to me today. I think we've given, pre-meds and med school students some excellent food for thought, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, there you have it, the best advice for getting into med school, in addition to landing top MCAT scores. Now remember, Linda's website, accepted.com, also has tons of free resources like blogs, articles, webinars, guides, and podcasts to help applicants anywhere in the world craft the perfect, compelling med school application. So make sure you check them out. Details below. If you are preparing to take on the MCAT, make sure you get Brainscape certified MCAT flashcards in your corner. We have distilled down and organized the science content you need to know into an awesome collection of smart flashcards, which are proven to help you learn and remember content twice as fast as traditional study methods. Armed with these, you'll keep up that healthy cadence of daily review that is so essential for landing high scores on the MCAT. And for even more guidance, check out the other videos we have on Brainscape's medical channel, including more interviews like this one. And go to our MCAT Academy for free study guides on everything you need to know to prepare for and ace the MCAT. These tools, together with your ambition and hard work, is everything you need to rise to your challenge.